Hello everyone again, and I just want to pick up here with the very, very important concept of internal rate of return. Basically this interest rate is called the internal rate of return, and it's basically what defines where it sets the net present value. You see here, equal to zero. Everyone see that? That sets the net present value of the cash flows equal to zero. So you can see here they're setting the net present value equal to zero here. All right. And they do an example with this timeline, and they solve for the internal rate of return, and it comes out to 12.25%. And that's the break-even point where the internal rate of return equals zero. Okay, so if the internal rate of return is greater than your cost of capital, the definition of that is you do the project. Okay? You do the project. So when you calculate the internal rate of return, that's equivalent to computing the compound annual growth rate of the cash flows. And I don't want to get into compound annual growth rate, all right? So here they are calculating the internal rate of return for a perpetuity, and you can see from the growth rate they're solving for R. Okay, they're looking for the value R, and they solve for R. So the internal rate of return comes out to 14% as they put the numbers in here. So they use the internal rate of return of a perpetuity equation, which we looked at from equation 4.11. So by equation 4.16, the internal rate of return of a growing perpetuity is right here, okay, as you can see. All right, so here's another example, and here's the timeline. So here's the cash flows. Okay, so they pay $40,000 up front for a forklift, and the deal is going to offer financing with no down payment, and you're going to make 4 annual payments of $15,000. So it's a 4-year annuity with a payment of $15,000 per year and a present value of $40,000. Okay. So the question is, we're going to set the net present value equal to zero, and then move the initial payment to the left-hand side, and we're going to try to solve for R. So the question is, what's the internal rate of return of this investment? And basically, you solve for R, and you have to basically take guesses, or you have to use Microsoft Excel. And Microsoft Excel has an IRR function built in. Okay, so you would use the internal rate of return IRR function in Excel, or so you would do that. So it turns out when you solve for the internal rate of return in this forklift example, it turns out that it is 18.45%. So here they are. In a couple different ways, you can basically use the Microsoft Excel, and it comes out to this value here. Okay. You can do it this way, and there's a couple different ways in Excel to do it. All right. So you solve right here. Here's your cash flows. Here's your present value. And here's another example. So here's another example. Here's the rate, the payment, the present value. So they show you a couple different examples of how to solve for the rate of return, or the and again, there's other ways of doing that. There's other ways of doing that. Okay. So as I was just saying, Excel has a built-in function, internal rate of return, that will calculate the internal rate of return of a stream of cash flows. So let me highlight that. Excel's internal rate of return function has the format IRR, values, and a guess. And you just put the values in as they do here, right? B2, and you see how they're doing this? The cell numbers, and it calculates it automatically. Okay. There are some problems with Microsoft Excel if the signs begin to flip, different flips. All right, so it's important to understand that, and I believe in another chapter we'll talk about that. All right. All right, so here's a summary of the time value of money. We're finished with this chapter now. Here's the 3 rules of time travel. All right, here's our 3 rules of time travel. Here's equation. Future value of a cash is basically here. Here's present value. Here's valuing a nice. This is a nice summary. Valuing a stream of cash flows. Calculating the net present value. Perpetuities and annuities. All right, and so here's all the equations in a nice format. And using an annuity spreadsheet or calculator, non-annual cash flows. So this is what we did in chapter 4, okay? Internal rate of return. So this finishes up chapter 4.